examining the Vedic Universe's vertical axis. Here I'm following up on some of the themes included in my former titles, especially Astronomy, the Bhagavat Purana, understanding the multidimensional universe of the Vedas, and invisible realms in the Vedic universe. I recommend you watch at least one of those before watching this, because this is effectively a sequel or a post-grad study if you prefer. You can view the others on my channel and are easily accessible on YouTube. So here I'll be addressing subjects surrounding the concept of the vertical axis of the Vedic universe as described in the 5th canto of the Bhagavat Purana, or the Srimad Bhagavatam. As described in the Astronomy of the Bhagavat Purana, Dr. Richard Thompson concludes there are 4 separate models there, namely the planisphere of the Earth, the geocentric orbits of the solar system, a topological map of the mountains of Central Asia, and the celestial realms of the demigods. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to be adding a 5th model, Bhugola, as described in the Surya Siddhanta, a global Earth. I suggest the Bhagavatam is describing what is regarded as the Earth or the Greater Earth from various points of view according to consciousness and perception. Indeed, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 24:318, it reads, "In each and every verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam and in each and every syllable, there are different meanings." It may also be that although the models have separate identities, they overlap in various ways to represent a consistent reality. Let's move on. The ecliptic and the equatorial planes. In the planisphere model, Mount Meru is placed at the Earth's north pole here. Now the Bhagavatam's divine realm of Dhruvaloka is placed in the same direction as our current pole star. It's described as perpendicular to Mount Meru. So there you go. You might assume that the Bhagavatam's plane of Bhumandala runs horizontal to this plane, equatorial plane like this. However, we read in the Bhagavatam that the path of the Sun, the ecliptic plane, orbits consistently horizontal to the plane of Bhumandala. Yet the Earth is tilted at an average of about 23.5 degrees from the Sun, giving us seasons. That would place the pole star and Dhruvaloka, well, a little more over there instead relative to the Sun. But in space that's all relative anyway, so let's get on. We also need to consider that Dhruvaloka is not actually the current pole star we call Polaris. Rather, it belongs to the spiritual world and is invisible to us, and is always perpendicular to the North Pole. Also note that another model of the 5th canto places the Earth at the edge of the celestial Jambudweep, and Mount Meru there is absolutely huge, so that one is not the North Pole. So how can we accommodate both Merus in one image or graph? Well, the 5th canto 21:14 compares the wheel-like orbit of the Sun to the turning of an ox-powered machine. It reads, "As in an oil-pressing machine, the first axle is attached to a second axle, which is 1/4 of long. The upper end of the axle is attached to Dhruvaloka by a rope of wind." This is a photo of one in action. At the Earth and the geocentric path of the Sun, the Earth's north pole is tilted towards Dhruvaloka, like this. In this comparison, that would make the celestial Mount Meru the vertical central axis of this ox-powered machine. That is an acceptable way of accommodating the Earth's tilt, with both Merus. Although this image here, I think, is slightly more proportionate. The northern and southern realms in the Vedic universe. The Bhagavatam focuses on the stars as seen from the northern hemisphere. It's worth noting, I think, that the vast majority of the population of the ancient world lived north of the equator. Now this map shows the countryside in proportion with the population from around 2,000 years ago. Even today, the Earth is northern hemisphere dominated. Most significantly though, India with all its holy places and rivers and mountains are north of the equator. Note, however, that the ecliptic path, as traced out on the Earth's surface, does cross India. And there it is. And here's the Tropic of Cancer, the most northerly latitude at which the Sun can be directly overhead on the summer solstice. An important historical city that is located near this crossing of the lines is Ujjain. It is a place with a long tradition of astronomy, and it is the longitude of the ancient prime meridian. Now here's the same lines here as traced onto a globe. Getting back. The Surya Siddhanta explains that Meru is both the north and south poles of Bhugola, the globe, Vedic astronomers were well aware of the southern hemisphere's constellations, but it appears its spiritual status was somewhat lower. For example, the powerful king Trishanku found himself cursed due to 3 misdemeanors, although he did have a useful ally. He gained a following of secret occultists and other kind of practitioners like that, and once Trishanku conducted a sacrifice with the purpose of ascending to heaven, but the demigods refused him. However, the great sage Vishwamitra allowed him to lift quickly off the ground, but the demigods pushed him down again, like this, and he ended up in a kind of a limbo. So in the end, he and his followers were sent down, upside down actually, to the Southern Constellations. Trishanku's abode is perpendicular to the South Pole, and all of the stars down there rotate around his abode. That is identified today as the Southern Cross. Vertically, Trishanku and his followers are located in the space between Bhumandala and the Earth and the hellish planets. Of course, looking at this graph again, if you go inside the Earth but also outside at the same time, we end up in the realm of Bilgasvarg, where various other kind of lower planets can be accessed: Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, and so forth. Of course, they're not physically within the Earth, but spread throughout the universe, and other planets in the solar system may be able to access them too. Now, looking at the Bhumandala solar system here. Now, according to the Bhugola Varanam, after Lokaloka mountain barrier, which is a distance from Earth just beyond that of Saturn, the level of Bhumandala drops rapidly into the Garbhodaka Ocean. This is a Lokavash, a dark region, near the edge of which is the distance of Uranus, so it's down there. Let's get closer. Now, from the edge of a Lokavash onwards, travel in one's gross physical body is not possible. Any further travel is only possible in more subtle ways in a vertical direction. Now, I'll be tempted to place therefore Neptune and Pluto around there somewhere too. They've got to be somewhere there. After all, Pluto is associated with the abode of Yamaraj, the courthouse amongst the hellish worlds. I'm giving the planets a vertical identity here based on ranking or type rather than physical distance from Earth along the horizontal axis. There's a huge difference, it seems, between the nature of the horizontal and the vertical axes of the Vedic universe. The center pivot of both is Mount Meru, the center of the physical and celestial universe. There it is. Understanding vertical distance in the universe. Now, a common measurement to use in the Bhagavatam is yojana, implies yoking. It originally indicated the distance that oxen yoked to royal carts could walk in a day. In practical terms, the exact distance must have wavered, depending on the oxen and the terrain and so forth. But on average, 1 yojana walking horizontally is about 8 miles. But in terms of the value of yojanas given for the distances to planets and the vertical dimension of the universe, I argue it's a completely different context. The Bhagavat Purana places the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, about 224 million yojanas above the Earth. That's about 1.8 billion miles in physical terms. Yet, several times Srila Prabhupada quotes the distance to Brahmaloka as 40,000 light years. That is a galactic scale distance in modern terms. So although Prabhupada often showed he was not so interested in specific things or conventional science, he was open to a very large-scale universe when talking in these terms. Also, the Surya Siddhanta offers similar galactic proportions. In other presentations, I've mentioned that the vertical axis of the universe is the direction of travel between planetary systems possible for demigods and advanced yogis, but not oxen. Such yogic travel is not physically walking along the ground, but a specific mode of travel in one's subtle body. 1 yojana is 1 day's walk for an oxen, so how far can the subtle body of a yogi travel in 1 day? The demigods and advanced yogis experience the universe in its true multidimensional reality, and to them it is somehow smaller, and perhaps they even use portals. And perhaps it could involve logarithmic distances as they work their way up the planetary hierarchy. It may well involve crossing many light years in terms of physical space. My point is that the Vedic universe is multidimensional and as a whole cannot be experienced by the laws we know. Humanoid life up and down the universe. As far as travelling up the vertical axis is concerned, there's not only a change of consciousness or space necessary, but along with that, time. Let me explain. In summary, the higher you go vertically towards Brahmaloka, time passes more quickly. For example, as a day on Brahmaloka passes, meanwhile, 4.32 billion years passes on the Earth. Let me use another example here. Example of relative time. 5 minutes in heaven, for example, could be 5 years passing on Earth, and even 10,000 years passing in hell. Now then, people in the Satya Yuga, of course, were not terrestrial beings stuck on Earth like ourselves. Rather, they were like demigods, and therefore they could live for vast periods of time compared to us. In my video Understanding the Multidimensional Universe of the Vedas, I briefly bring attention to the connection between the key planets along the vertical axis of the universe and the chakras of the human body. The higher the chakra, the higher the planet, and the higher the consciousness of the inhabitants. We could express the varying consciousness in terms of different proportions of the modes of nature. Let me explain. The modes of nature represent the scaffolding of the universe, our nature, our behavior, what we eat, how we give in charity, the time of day, tasting music, and so forth. All can be categorized as having different proportions of these modes, namely goodness, represented here as yellow, passion as red, and ignorance as dark blue. The mode of goodness, although not transcendental in itself, is a springboard to cultured and sustainable spiritual life. Now, if we can impose different proportions of the modes of nature on that vertically arranged planetary systems in the universe, we'll use a pie chart like this. The higher the planet, the greater the proportion of the modes of goodness. The lower the planet, the greater the ignorance. The Earth is a middle planet with a healthy dose of the mode of passion. We can also relate the vertical axis with types of bodies across the universe. You see, the Puranas explain that throughout the universe there are about 400,000 different species of humanoids and humans. Those bodies, and indeed the environments they have, are made of varying combinations of the following gross and subtle elements. There is earth, water, fire, air, and ether, plus the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego. Now, for example, the earthly middle planet terrestrials, that's us, have bodies made of a large proportion of the grosser elements, mainly water and earth and so forth. But the higher you go up, the proportion of the subtle element increases. For example, Srila Prabhupada said, as we have bodies made of earth, but then the demigods that live on the sun have bodies made of fire, combined with subtle elements. Life is possible, so fire, but also intelligence and mind. And life is possible anywhere in the universe because of the jiva, the soul, is what gives life. Now, the higher you go up, the more subtle the body, as I mentioned before. So Lord Brahma, who resides at the top of the universe, has a body made of pure intelligence. The bodies of demons, however, have plenty of grosser elements like earth and water, but there's also a major ingredient there of the mind. That makes their bodies overall more subtle than ours, but their minds are very much rooted, looking down on this material world. They only see matter in all its potential detail, nothing spiritual. Now, let us briefly return back to the upper part of the universe. It's described that within Bhumandala's concentric rings there are realms with mountains surrounded by various exotic oceans, populated by cultured people. The three-dimensional yantra, the Mahal Meru, shows how those planets are actually vertically placed higher up than the Earth. The Graha planets of the solar system are lower, but are connected to them. Let me explain that briefly. There's Mahal Meru there on the left, and here's a graph. The horizontal axis showing the physical distance from Earth. The vertical level above Bhumandala is the vertical axis. Let's choose, say for example, Venus, Sukra Graha. It's quite low down, and of course it's a pretty hellish planet if you go there with our senses, but moving your way up the vertical element, of course a vertical direction, you'll find a much more heavenly planet, as described of course within the rings of Bhumandala. So that's all. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please share it with others, and please watch my other presentations as well. Hare Krishna. Thank you.